I'm Erin Markin. I am currently a fishery biologist with NOAA National Marine Fisheries Service and their Office of Protected Resources. I've been there just over a year now, but my sturgeon experience is much longer than that. I was here at Horn Point Laboratory as a faculty research assistant for about 13 years working on the sturgeon project. So sturgeon are odd-looking fish, and they get really large. So the sturgeon that we have, the Atlantic sturgeon that we have here at Horn Point Laboratory, can get 14 feet and 800 pounds. And if you see one in the wild, you'll notice these little whiskers, these little barbels that hang kind of from the underneath of their snout, and that's what they'll use to sense food. And their snout kind of is rounded, kind of protrudes, and that's what they'll kind of use to dig into sediment once they find suitable food items. And they're tube mouth, so they have a mouth that'll actually protrude. They'll kind of suck up what's their sediment, and what they'll eat is worms, crustaceans, mollusks, small fish, and that's what they'll use then to kind of, with their mouth, protrude and grab that sediment in order to eat it. So sturgeon are a very ancient species. They date back 150 to 200 million years. So they have some of these ancient carryovers from, from millions of years ago. And one of those is the scutes, those hard bony plates that they have along the side. So sturgeon have 5 rows of these bony plates. In the Chesapeake Bay, sturgeon were historically important food source for Native Americans and early European settlers. And then kind of in the late 1800s or early 1900s was this kind of boom for the caviar production. So caviar, as you may or may not know, are the eggs of the female that they then process into caviar and sell as a food item to people. So in the early 1900s, there was the big boost for caviar, and then the population kind of was overfished and plummeted after that. You're removing a lot of the females, mature females from the population. It takes a long time then for sturgeon, for their populations to rebound. They typically don't become sexually mature until it could be anywhere from like 7 to 25 years, depending on the part of the range in which you're looking. So it can take a while until they even reach sexual maturity, and then they tend to not spawn every year. So currently, in the Chesapeake Bay, the Atlantic sturgeon was listed as an endangered species in 2012. So with the Atlantic sturgeon, it was listed into 5 distinct population segments. So the northernmost segment is listed as threatened, and the 4 southern segments are listed as an endangered species, which means you obviously can't handle them, you can't fish for them. It was actually in the mid-1990s when a moratorium was put on for fishing for Atlantic sturgeon. The Atlantic sturgeon that we have here at Horn Point Laboratory were initially brought in for a broodstock population. So that means we are rearing them until they become sexually mature. And then what we wanted to do was hopefully then rear them, spawn them, and then raise the young, and then possibly do releases into the Chesapeake Bay or some of the tributaries in the Chesapeake Bay as part of the restoration. And there were some hurdles that we had to experience and overcome in order to make them part of the captive population. And part of that is because they're used to eating their native prey in their natural environment, and to get them onto a commercial diet can be challenging. And then given the size of some of the sturgeon that we have here, so the largest sturgeon is I think 150 pounds or so. It's a quite large fish, over 6 feet long, and we weigh these every weekly to monthly, depending on our needs and the needs, of what we're monitoring for the fish. So the Atlantic sturgeon that we have here, obviously I couldn't pick any favorites. I mean, it's hard to, you shouldn't say fish have personalities, but I really think they do. I believe they're very cute fish. They just kind of have those little whiskers that hang down and this little rounded snout, and they do spend a lot of time on the bottom of the tank, but occasionally they do come up, and it's kind of like, they do have their own kind of personalities, and you knew when you're walking by a tank which one was going to splash you or not. They're really adorable fish, and if you ever get a chance to see them or work with them, I'd highly recommend doing so.